Morning campers, coffee time. So, it was announced yesterday that Kidflix was closed down. What's Kidflix? Well, it's Netflix, but not for kids. It's Netflix featuring children in a way that would turn the stomachs of most decent human beings with a soul on this planet. The really astounding thing about this, and it's on the dark web apparently, is that they had 1.8 million subscribers. Let that figure sink in for a second. 1.8 million people subscribed to a website that showed snuff movies and child porn. You see, that's really the war that we're in. We're in a war against a group of people that think it's okay to not only have sex with children, pedophiles. That's what the last three things that the LGBTQ the plus is for the pedophiles. If you haven't noticed that the normalization of pedophilia has been going on for the last few decades, then where have you been? And why aren't you bothered about this? Somebody said to me once when I was living in Marrakesh, why do you care about all these children? And I was like, why don't you care about all these children? Because every single child on this planet that is touched inappropriately, including myself, I was touched inappropriately by a doctor when I was 11 years old. My father was raped by a lay preacher at a church in Budbrook in Northampton when he was 10, and he wasn't the only one. And my grandparents were too scared. I asked my grandmother before she died why she didn't say anything or do anything, and she looked at me in the eye and she said, because we were scared. It's the same with all the paedophile priests in Ireland. How did they hold that together? How did they get away with it for so long? Because they were pillars of the community. Because as a child, if you spoke out against a priest, your family would get a knock on the door from the guard saying, no, you can't do that. And if you do that, we're going to put you into we're going to have to question your mental stability and lock you up in a mental home. That's the evil that we've been up against our entire lives. If you're not angry about that, then you're not human. I've said repeatedly throughout my podcast that I started in 2020. I stood up and spoke out when everybody else was putting masks on and getting jabbed and staying locked down and doing as they were told by the government. I knew this was coming. I knew COVID was coming. I knew that we were on the verge of being taken into what George Bush called the New World Order. And when we're successful, and we will be, remember that? He said that during the Iraq War, about 1990. George Bush, the same George Bush that was in a helicopter with Bill Clinton with a rifle, hunting children, drugged, naked children through woods, through forests. One of those survivors of that human hunting party is Kathy O'Brien, who wrote Transformation of America. Go and read that book. While you're at it, go and read The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Isabet, who was in the education department under Ronald Reagan. This is when you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. The question I get asked a lot is, well, why is this stuff still happening? Why is pedophilia still happening? Why is mass migration still happening if the good guys are in control? Trump must be a bad guy. He must be controlled by Israel. I don't think so. I don't think so, because we were supposed to all be dead in 2017. Well, maybe not all of us, but if you look at the Georgia Guidestones, the satanic 10 commandments that were erected in 1980 in Georgia, were paid for by an anonymous man who called himself R.C. Christian. $30 million, I think it was, to put them up. These were exploded from the inside about 3 years ago, by the way, but you can still look them up and you can read them. And number one in the satanic Ten Commandments was to maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetuity with nature. The in perpetuity with nature is kind of their get out clause, their plausible deniability. But it doesn't take a genius to work out that if the stated aim was to keep humanity under 500 million and that there are allegedly 8 billion people on the planet, that means that 7.5 billion people were slated to die. People like me were going to have dots put on our door and we were going to be carted off. The first people that you get rid of when you're trying to take over humanity is all the people that know what you're doing. This is why there were millions of coffins ordered for the FEMA camps in America and electronic guillotines, hundreds of thousands of them, for people like me. Now, I'm not a hero, but I did stand up, right? I stood up because I said to myself, am I willing to die for this cause? And the answer was yes. Do I want my children, and I have a lot of children, to live in the New World Order? And the answer was no. And I listened to God, because God was talking to me. God was telling me, this is a spiritual war, and this is being fought on many, many levels. Go and look up the armor of God. We fight not against people, we fight against principalities of darkness. The depth of evil in this world is far greater than most people have any idea about, which is why this is known to people like me as the Great Awakening. And the Great Awakening is what we're going through right now. And the reason why we have to see this stuff unfold is because most people will just, you know, I've been called an idiot and a conspiracy theorist and a nutter and a tinfoil hat wearer and a grifter and all these fucking meaningless names for years. It doesn't mean anything to me anymore. It just bounces off me. It used to upset me, but I don't give a shit anymore. And not giving a shit about what people think about you is critical for your survival and our survival as a species. Find the grit. Find the courage to think for yourself. You start by turning off the television and stop consuming the mainstream media. You start by looking at the water that you're drinking and bathing in. Don't assume that the water is good just because you're in the UK and the UK would never put poison in our water. Or Ireland, I don't know, the water authorities, well, they couldn't possibly do that. Of course they would. They've been trying to fucking kill you your entire life. What kind of society puts vaccines into children, for fuck's sake? A sick society. To make a society like this unsick, you have to undo the brainwashing, because the brainwashing is the thing that's kept most people in place. And fear is their biggest weapon. Once you start connecting to your creator, you won't have any fear, because you're going to realize that you're an eternal spirit. And you've been here many times before. People like me are just here to remind you and to hopefully nudge you in the right direction and hopefully keep you laughing sometimes, because that's really important, because the demons hate laughter. And what do I mean by demons? Well, we are surrounded by fourth dimensional entities that are constantly whispering in your ear. Do you remember the angel and the devil in the cartoons? That's true. You've got the voice of God and you've got the voice of the demons. And they will do anything to nudge you into behavior that fills you full of guilt and shame for the rest of your life, that locks you in to their false matrix. If you want to know what's really going on, you could try my book. This is not an advert, by the way, because this isn't for sale, but it will be on sale soon. But this is called God Wins. This covers everything in picture format and poetry. And this one is called Weapons of Mass Protection, that I wrote with Abby Wynn. This one explains how to protect yourself from demonic entities. You can get that on Amazon, I think. I don't care if you buy these books or not. What I ask you to do is go and do your own research before you start. shouting about Keir Starmer or Donald Trump or the war in Ukraine. It's all theatre, all right? Look inside, find your connection to God. Have a wonderful day. God bless you.